to the Insomniac Show with Nicolette and Brian. We'll get real deep with you, educating, inspiring, and solving problems with some of the most inspirational humans on the planet. Buckle up and come on the journey.
I'm excited. All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here once again with Leigh Clark. She is the Chief Kindness Officer over at Kindly, and she is now the author of a book coming out by the time you see this today. Actually, no, I'm sorry, Tuesday. So we just passed you. So we're 2 days behind. So it came out on Tuesday, June 8th, and it's called Living Kindly. Bold conversations about the power of kindness, and alongside a bunch of other awesomely kind authors. So thank you so much, Leigh, for joining us again. We are excited to chat with you today.
I love hanging out with you guys. I'll come here anytime you want me to come here.
Absolutely. You're always welcome. Always welcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So last time we chatted, you were about to give a TEDx talk, and you've done a whole lot since then. So why don't you just bring us up, just because I feel like you've lived about 35 lives in that time. And because I follow you closely on LinkedIn. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what is she up to now?
Yeah, doing a few things. So I was prepping for the TEDx talk. It was obviously a global pandemic, which changed this whole kind of launch I had planned for an original book called Swim, Succeeding with an Impact Mindset, that talks about, personal evolution and growth. And, the book was going to come out the same day as the TED Talk, and then the TED Talk got canceled. And then my self-evolution things felt really disconnected from where the world was. So that all got shelved. And I was like, I still really want to get out in the world and share something empowering, give people some hope right now, give them a sense of comfort, because the news just got really, really sad really quickly, and a lot of people were losing family members, myself included, and it just was not the time to talk about how to get to your best self. It was how to get out of bed. So I started thinking about how could I do this, and with the kindness community and with Kindly, it's all about empowering others to be kind. So I was like, well, why don't I get some global voices together? And so I did like any author would do. I went on LinkedIn and searched kindness, and then clicked people, and whoever came up, I just cold pitched them this book. And, for some people it wasn't for them. And I was totally good with that. This is probably the most organic project I've ever done, because if they were not energetically aligned, I didn't feel like that it was their, mission. It was part of their path, and that was cool. And there were only a couple that it wasn't. And then the authors that came forward, just these amazing people, like a guy who lives on a houseboat in Amsterdam, who used to be a head of marketing for a lot of big businesses, a guy in London who's running a consulting agency for kindness in business, a woman in Raleigh who's also running a consultancy for kindness in business. And even with that, I was like, oh, I hope there's no conflict. And then it was oh, this book's about kindness, duh. So now they're working together across the pond. They have a shared podcast. So it was really cool to see who emerged. And the only instruction I gave them for this book was write a chapter, 3,000 words or less if the story is less, or more if the story is more, write till you're done, about the impact of kindness on your life or the lives around you. And, some authors were like, more direction, please. I'm like, no. I want this to be yours. I want it to feel authentic. I want to share my platform. I want to, put the focus on you and all the work you're doing for kindness as well. And I don't want to over direct the content. So until all the chapters were submitted, I really didn't even know what angles people were going to come from or what perspectives. And I was just pleasantly surprised by, what this team put together. We were adding authors up until April. Yeah. And some people got their original draft on the original deadline, which was before the end of 2020. And in April, I'm like, we have another one. But, it just, that kind of thing happened organically, and it was really cool. At the same time, I switched jobs in another huge tech company. Anybody who checks LinkedIn, you can see where I work. I'm not going to mention it because I don't, want to go on lawyers and that. But yeah, so it's been an interesting time. It's interesting that, people always ask me, how's your employer going to be cool about you also doing this? And it's the right employers encourage their people to go out and make an impact. They encourage them to get into their communities, roll up their sleeves and make a difference. And the question isn't, you know, do you have to give up your passion for making the world a better place to work somewhere? Then the price is too high. You know, then if I made that decision a long time ago, and it's interesting. I was fearful, like in the beginning, and now it's like, yeah, they actually hired me. That's part of the reason, because they see, you know, the ethical component and, you know, who I am and what I stand for. So that's what I've been up to.
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But I think it's also part of what you mentioned, even with the authors, right? The, you know, the group of people writing this, you know, it's sort of one of those things like the rising, you know, the tide rises all ships, right? If you're all working towards the same common goal, it's in everyone's best interest to be part of something that's doing good for the community or the company or just the human race, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see the type of people who, you know, an algorithm on LinkedIn decides that they're kind. And it's just interesting because now we're all content creators. No matter how like often you post, like you're a content creator. And it's interesting to see that humans now have like a brand, you know, that's associated with the types of posts they do. And so interesting that like literally data science is, you know, probably 80% of the author roster. A few I knew were inherently kind. Like Debbie Lundberg, who gave a stranger her kidney. So I was like, yeah, that's.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up.
I mean, I'm nice. I don't know if I can give away organs, but I certainly support people who do. And Debbie's one of them. But, you know, I work in data science, right? I work in tech. So to see the tech applied, the algorithm, like bring up people who have enough posts and persona that they're attached to that word, it's amazing. You know, it's amazing. I met other chief kindness officers. Like I thought I was the only one.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about, because, you know, I love data science too. So we're going down a totally different road than probably Nicolette wanted to with this. But here's the interesting thing. Like, you know, I recently actually even said that in one of my LinkedIn posts. I was like, not my normal post, right? Because sometimes you're doing stuff that's sort of outside of the scope of that. You know, now it's interesting because when you're looking at those algorithms, it's how much is the human component after the algorithm goes, here it is, right? You said you spend a lot of time looking at these authors, you know, making sure the energy is aligned. So how much time really went into that part of it?
You know, it was the conversation. So if they were willing to take the call, and ironically, Magnus Wood's chapter is called Billy Refused the Call, which is talking about when you're called to do something, you know, from your heart and from your soul, like, how do you prioritize that over materialism or whatever? Right. So whoever took the call, it was like, what is the energy aligned with this project? Like, are they excited about it? Do they feel like they have a narrative? Even one of our authors was like, not sure at the beginning. And I was like, it's totally cool. If it's not for you, it's no harm, no foul. Like, I just want people who this feels good to. And she actually called back and was like, you know what? I really want to get involved. And she's been instrumental in being the connector for all the authors. And now we're like we joke and say we're the kindness Avengers, like, which I wouldn't, you know, put out in the media, because Avengers usually is just like they're avenging justice violently. But I would say crusaders, you know, kindness crusaders. But there's a camaraderie, there's like a brotherhood and sisterhood among the authors. And I don't know, I think sometimes you just get instincts on people. If you don't go through the lens of fear, like, oh, what if they've never written blah, blah, blah. You know, one of our authors who wrote one of the most amazing chapters, Jonathan Darling, he wrote Micro Moments Equal Massive Impact, which I think is a cool concept because it shows people how little tiny moments add up to a great life. You know, his LinkedIn headline was like, I don't know, 10 plus TEDx rejections. He like has it in his title. You know, so somebody who's going from a fear-based thing might be like 10 TEDx's you got rejected. And I was like, no, he just hasn't found the right platform yet. And like, I encouraged that. I didn't know what his writing capability was, but I could tell what kind of person he was when he took the call and the amount of enthusiasm he had for the project. And then, you know, as we started being LinkedIn connections, seeing how he really uses his feed to raise the vibration, it's like,
right.
I think fear plays a big part in whether or not you can really hone in on your instincts on people and projects.
Now imagine how many people because of an algorithm you were not privy to, you know. And how many people are out there that are doing really kind things and have done things maybe even far greater than this group of people, but you know, they've got like, you know, I you know, I don't know, I own a gas station, you know, so you would know, right? Because how are you gonna know, right, if you're not putting that out there? So imagine that. That's
And the good news for anybody who's listening who doesn't have an algorithm pulling them in for kindness, we are going to be doing a series with this book. So there will be additional editions of, you know, things like topics like inclusivity and equality, topics like, you know, kindness in the family, you know, and those types of different life situations. You know, my mom's talked a lot about, you know, her friends who are in retirement right now, and all of a sudden their careers are done and they're like, well, what now? You know, and so they are kind, they, you know, gave back all along, but like, they don't really know how to get involved in some cases, or they don't want to overcommit. So I think there's all these subsectors of humans that are facing different types of challenges where kindness becomes paramount. So it will be interesting to see how that continues to unfold. I think I'll always keep the same guidelines of, you know, you came up or like somebody recommended you, and then here's the topic and go.
So do you think people, okay, so you said like fear of committing, or like people fear committing. Do you think because kind people, like you don't want to start something you can't finish, or finish helping someone? So it's hard to like go, oh man, I don't want to start this because I don't want to let someone down on the tail end.
Yeah. And I think that's why this book was easy for a lot of people to get involved with, because writing an entire book, which I already have one on the shelf that I didn't put out, that's a huge commitment. And with like technology again, and you can literally dictate into your phone, it doesn't take very long to write 3,000 words. I mean, I drink Red Bull. I'm a fast talker.
Hey! Come on. Oh my God, they're both sugar-free too.
I mean, you got to balance it with water.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a water person. I will give you that.
So I got you both covered right now.
Yeah. Those are literally the only two things I drink. Pretty much water and Red Bull. That's it. You know.
So you'd be great for dictation on a book. You just sit and I love it because I'm not overthinking about the grammar. I'm just literally speaking, and speaking and communicating is my favorite thing. You know, out loud. Anyone who knows me will nod their head at that. But
I know the feeling. I finished my last book, I think, in 3 months, Nicolette?
It's awesome.
You know what? Let me ask you a question. So you like to dictate, right? I'm going off topic for a second. So it's weird. Do you feel like your mind works faster when you're speaking as opposed to writing? And I ask that because I can't work that way, right? I can't. I can only work faster if I'm doing the physical act of writing. At it. And if I'm saying it, it's coming out all jumbled. It's not right. Yeah, I know.
You're not drinking the right stuff, Nicolette. You're not drinking.
You guys got to be in a commercial or something with Red Bull.
Totally. Hey, Red Bull.
It doesn't come out.
Coming for you.
And the words, you can take the same thing, and 2 minutes later, it'll come out beautifully in writing. Like, it's just amazing that it works that way for you guys. I know, Brian, you don't have a problem with that either.
And sometimes it's just about getting ideas together, and then you take those ideas to the paper and you rework those sentences and you rearrange the structure. It's just like getting your thoughts down. And a lot of people have the hardest time just getting started. And I had a hard time getting started. I mean, I was one of the last ones to finish my chapter because I wanted to really understand the whole of the book in order to put, you know, something together that really showcased all of the impact that I had as a reader, as well as, you know, how this project came to be. But I love pressure. Like, I love deadlines. I thrive in that. I hate it that that's the way I am, but it's the way I am. So, you know, that usually turns into energy. Like, I'm going to get this done, but other people need time. And I know some of the writers in the book, you know, took a lot of time, you know, sent it to their editors, went through revisions, then everything went through revisions by our editor. Fun shout out. You were talking about doing a book in 3 months, Brian. Our editor teaches courses on like how to write a book quickly. She has people who've written books in a weekend, which blows my mind. I mean, I'm definitely too much of a procrastinator to let that happen, but She also became our publisher because she just opened a publishing company
Nice.
called Aurora Coriolis. I didn't want to screw that up. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. Aurora Coriolis. And we are her first published book.
Wow, that's
which is
awesome.
so cool. And, you know, we had a little bit of a writer change at the end, just, you know, things that weren't energetically lining up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, do you want to write a chapter? Because she just has so much invested in this project. So she's an author, our editor, and now our publisher. And so really cool to see how that takes place. And I love her chapter. I mean, she talks about like being cynical about kindness. She talks about like the different phases of kindness you go through as a child. You know, you have this perception like being nice is being kind. And there are a lot of people who debate that in the book. You know, they'll debate like there's a difference between nice and kind.
I agree.
Nice is, you know, appeasing other people. Kind is, you know, taking an intentional action to do something or, you know, put some kind of energy into a situation with another human.
Would you argue that maybe there are people who are just innately kind, like just naturally? They don't have to kind of make that effort. It's different than nice, but they just are kind naturally.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I've always considered myself to be kind, but like as the years have gone on, I've realized that some of that is just wanting other people to be happy. And there's been times that I've spared my own happiness to make others happy, not through acts of kindness or the charity. That's my joy, but just in personal relationships and things where, you know, I just always wanted to make people happy. And I've come to realize like, there's some people you can't make happy.
Oh yeah.
And you could spend your entire life trying to make them happy. And that's just not going to work for them. And you really, like somebody said to me, you can either be a fountain or a drain. Right. So my goal is always to be a fountain, right? But also if I'm with somebody who's constantly a drain, then, you know, I've got to evaluate, like insulate myself so I have that energy to give back to people who really are receptive and need it. And, you know, maybe they're down on their luck, but like they have the right heart for it. And I tell a couple stories in the book about that. Just people who, you know, gave it when they had it. And then when they didn't, there was no one left. You know, that's where I want to put my energy instead of trying to take people who are unhappy and, you know, try and be like a Tinkerbell sprite around them.
Right.
Like, hey.
So how do you balance that for yourself, right?
Right.
Kindness to yourself versus kindness to others. And also too, how do you make the decision who's the fountain and who's the drain? And when sometimes you gotta, I mean, I think everyone in their life, you've had to sort of go, I need to really separate myself from this person because it's so negative. It's become toxic, right? You know, so how, you know, so two questions.
And I've been a drain on people too. So I think that there's like a symbiosis, right? Like there's moments in your life where you're the fountain. There's moments in your life where you're the drain. And if that's symbiotic, if it feels like not disproportionate, that's cool. Like everybody has their down days. Everybody has their up days. You know, I have friends who are like constantly optimistic and I'm like, hey, I'm a realist. Like sometimes it's not that great. And I don't want to pretend it's all sunshine and roses to avoid feeling my feelings. But at the same rate, I think in any relationship, obviously there's give and take. But, you know, you see how people show up for you in those big moments. You see how people show up for you when you're in a bad place and how they support you through that. And like, are they only there for when you're a fountain and when you're a drain, they're ghost? So I think there's that balance in it. But I think you really have to think about first the energy you bring into the room. Right. So I've been doing a lot of reading on psychology and personalities. One of the people who reviewed our book is Jamil Zaki, who is the director of social neuroscience at Stanford, which is all understanding the kindness connectivity to the brain, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins. And so I've been doing a lot of reading on psychology. And, you know, it's interesting because there are, you know, everybody goes through their things, but I think it's really identifying within yourself. What can you change within you first, right? So if I start pointing fingers, I have to do the same assessment on myself. Make sure that what I'm thinking of others isn't true of me. Is there truth in that about myself? But I do think it's like getting comfortable with drawing boundaries, which I've never been good at, like at all. I'd be like, here's my boundary. And they'd be like, what? I'm like, okay, cool. Never mind. Not a big deal.
Right over it.
Yeah, just like, yep, here comes the bulldozer. Cool. I mean, I said what I had to say, but take it down. so I've learned recently, especially as the energy grows and like I'm in a really like intense job and I'm doing all this kindness stuff from the bottom of my heart just to help make the world a better place and leave a legacy of kindness, that I've had to really stick to like what are acceptable boundaries for me and how can I be supportive to people without allowing it to take away from the things I need to do to be happy and productive.
That's so tough.
It's so tough. It is. And I have a hard time. I mean, I really struggle. Like I struggle to say I can't do this or I won't do that. Like I'm like, I'll try.
So I have a question. When you're balancing between, right? So boundaries with your family or loved ones, right? Versus boundaries with work. Sometimes I think, you know, how do you handle that, right? Is there a different tactic or is it the same tactic?
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's what one of the authors, Mark Shapiro, wrote a little bit about in his chapter. He's the founder of a company called Digital Humanity, which are like two things I love, digital and humanity, and created a love bomb app that you can actually send love bombs to your friends and you get points for doing so. And he talked about that in the nice versus kind debate. And it's like at work, I mean, you can be so nice and but you're really wanting to appease or you're wanting to perform, right? Because it's all performance based.
Right.
So it's not necessarily kindness and it's not necessarily also being forthcoming about, you know, what your lines are. And people respect people who have lines at work. I respect people who have lines. I respect people who say, I'm not on after 5:30. I'm at my kid's soccer game. Yep. Okay. Like, so it's interesting how easily we take other people's boundaries and we totally are like, sure. And then with our own, we're like, God, I hope they don't think that like my kid's soccer game is more important than my job. But those are the people who feel constant burnout too, because they're appeasing and performing and doing all these things that don't feel good to them. And yet, you know, hoping from that, they're going to be seen and valued more than others because they're so accommodating.
Okay.
And in personal relationships and in professional relationships, if you know anyone who's too accommodating, it's kind of annoying. I know because I am one of those people. So, yeah, you know, it can be too much. So I think, you know, I try to apply to myself now as I'm evolving, you know, would I respect this boundary from someone else if they put it forth? And the answer is 95% of the time, yes, it's realistic expectations.
And there is a difference between, you know, and Brian, you mentioned personal relationships. You know, it's always going to be different. There are people very close to me that I can't have certain conversations with, you know, and drawing that boundary is super difficult because you want to be supportive and you want to care. You want to show you care because you do care. But at what expense? You know, at what expense? So how do you kind of balance that? Loving from a distance, like supporting from a distance instead of kind of getting entangled in that. And it's hard. It's hard. And I feel guilty personally a lot of times.
Well, I think that's what happens a lot with family, because when they are a constant drain, I'm going to use that drain analogy. When they are a constant drain, it's hard to go, wow, I really don't want to be around my family member or whatever the case is, right? You know, maybe it's a sibling or a parent or whatever the case is. You know, that's really rough on people and it's emotionally taxing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really hard with families. I think, you know, families are the greatest source of joy, but sometimes they're the greatest source of stress as well. Because there's so much ingrained in the way you were raised and like who raised you and their own growing up that happened along your childhood. And, you know, as you become an adult and you partner up, and there's just a lot of dynamics with family where it might be different if you didn't feel that familial connection, where sometimes I think people feel trapped by that familial connection. So they feel like they have to tolerate certain things, you know, and on other sides, it's like, no, you know, like you basically are the captain of your own ship. If there's a relationship that's toxic, you know, that's not working, then you got to address that. It doesn't matter what the DNA is, you know? And I know a lot of people who've gone through that. And, you know, there's people like, I couldn't imagine not talking to my brother, but I have friends that don't talk to their siblings, and that's what they need to do to be happy. That's okay. I mean, I just think that and it might actually irritate people more because they know this is family. It's like they feel like they have an obligation, instead of just saying, like, if it's really, you know, detracting from my life or my child's life or whatever, that, you know, you can evaluate that too. Doesn't mean you have to be cruel, but it also means you have to protect yourself.
You know, you bring up kids. This we've been kind of skating around this kids thing come up a couple times. So I've had this thought in the back of my mind, and I was thinking about you know, you mentioned you have a 4-year-old, and Brian, you've got like 30 kids. So you know, how do we you know, how do we teach that kindness? You know, for example, my son was kind of shocked when I would give money to the, you know, to the homeless guy who stays outside of the market, and on various occasions. And he always asks questions. You know, he's like, you know, he has no money. Like, why are you giving him money? And you know, there are a lot of people who won't, right? Because you know, sometimes there are situations where you know, you don't know where that money's going. And I know we talked about this before, Brian. You know, sometimes it's nice to buy a meal for someone and give it to them, maybe instead of the money. And but sometimes you're just driving by, and you know, it just feels like something I need to do personally. And like, how do we pass? Like, I'm so proud that he sees that, and I actually recently made him go give the guy the money, and he did it, and he's a very shy, introverted child who does not like other humans, but you know, he felt like compelled to do this, and I felt really proud in that moment. So, you know, how do we do things like that for our children? You know, how do we teach that kindness? Do you have anything in mind that comes to mind?
Yeah. We actually started a kindness kids group, kind of spin off of the kindness community, because it is such a specific thing. So you want to teach your kids to be safe, right? You don't want them to be overly nice and kind and open, because there are, you know, there are bad things in the world too.
Absolutely.
You want to show them productive ways that they can get involved. And, you know, my hope someday is to have like a kindness center where kids can come and learn things like painting rocks and leading them around town. That's a very safe thing to do. It's self-directed exercise. It leaves it for the other human to find. Or volunteering on Thanksgiving morning to deliver food to families, to show that, you know, you're grateful for the day that you're afforded, but you want to start by giving back. So I've actually gone through and kind of made a list of things I find safe, but I'm in the same mode with my child. He's very kind, but he thinks everyone is his best friend. Like, he's the opposite. We went to a barbecue in Illinois, and he's like, "It's my family." And we're like, I was like, "Welcome. That's he's your family." So he's really, you know, he really loves other people, but then it's the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like, sometimes I'm encouraging him to like step back and, you know, make sure he knows kind of the framework and the rules. So I think kindness among families, I think anything comes from leading by example. I mean, I've seen this in being a mom, you know, for 4 years now. It's just, they're not going to do what you say. They're going to do what you do. Right. And I think that's a lesson that's lost on a lot of people, that they think, well, I told him to this, or I told her to that. But it's like, what are you doing? Like, are you exhibiting the same behavior you're asking for? Are you saying please? Are you saying thank you when you're demanding please and thank you from your kid? And then you're like, hand me a plate, you know? So I think like everything, I think, has to be introspective, right? Because that's the only place you can do the work. But I think seeking out family groups and resources and clever ideas, you know, even making cards, like have them color cards and send them over to the hospital for people who don't get any visitors, and explain to them, you know, you're making this for, you know, sick people who haven't had visitors. Let's give them something special. So I like a lot of those, like a little bit a step removed from the interaction, because I don't want to teach my son at the same rate to, you know, trust everyone he meets. Yeah.
But I think something you point out is really important, because my dad used to always say this when we were kids. He's like, words and actions need to align, like end of story, you know? So don't just say things, or don't just do things. And then so always everything needs to align, you know, end of story. He used to actually use it that's how you know if someone tells the truth a lot, you know, if their words and their actions are aligning, but it almost applies to everything in life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, anybody can talk. But especially with our kids, I think that we want them to be better than we were. And so we instill all the stuff that we haven't done the work on. And for me personally, you know, sometimes I worry that I'm too nice with him, or too soft, or too easy. I don't want him to feel entitled.
Right.
But, you know, I try and save my like, okay, timeout, you know, like stuff for something really like he put himself at risk or something like that. But yeah, I think your words and actions need to align on all fronts. I mean, you see this at work too, where people say, you know, they could talk a great game. I'm in sales. So it is full of people who can talk a big game and have matching pocket squares. So, you know, you see a lot of people like run their mouths and say the things, but they don't follow up. They don't back it up. You know, even in my day to day, I always ask customers, like, what are the challenges? What are the problems? Like, what can we solve for? Most salespeople don't want to hear any of the problems because they think it might hurt them from selling, but it does the opposite. You know, if you're willing to solve problems for someone and you genuinely care about their satisfaction with the partnership, then you earn the right to solve problems with them through new products because they know that you're there for their best interest, not yours. And I think we have to look at that same thing in life. Like, are we doing things to be self-serving? Or are we doing things because they feel good and they feel energetically aligned? And I think, like Nicolette, to your example, you know, you may hand out the window, but you feel energetically aligned. I want to give. And yeah, you could be like, where's this money going? It really isn't that, because that one moment, no matter what they're going to do with it, you made a human connection. And in the book, Francesca Donlin, who's a professor of a course called The Kindness Effect at FGCU, which is really interesting. So now kids have access through AI to any information. Like, I could ask Alexa right now anything and she'll tell me, like, long division, don't need it. She could do all that. But they're now creating coursework like at Stanford, at FGCU, and other universities, Princeton too as well, that they're teaching kids about compassion, empathy, kindness, social interaction skills that, you know, we worked on group projects. We always knew there was one who did no work. There was one who like controlled the whole project, you know, and it's interesting that kids really need that now more than ever, is to really be introspective and think about how they show up in the world and realize that life isn't happening to them, it's happening for them. And that there is, you know, there's a lot riding on how you show up.
Yeah. Yep. And, you know, I do want to say, just on the topic of, you know, where's that money going? I will share something. So, I was at the gas station. I told you this, Brian. I was at the gas station. There's a gentleman that I see there often. And he wanted a pack of cigarettes. He wanted cigarettes. Like, he wanted a cigarette. And I was like, I'm a smoker, right? So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna buy this guy a pack of cigarettes. You know what? Like, how many times have people done things for me that I shouldn't have or didn't deserve, or, you know? And yeah, maybe he's gonna go get cancer, but, you know, I felt in that moment, rather than give him that money, there was just one thing he wanted, and if I could do that, you know, maybe his day, whatever, maybe it gets him through his day, however terrible that is, you know, and that's where I went with it. So, and the guy at the gas station who I see every day, he's like, what is wrong with you? I need things too. Give me money. You know, he felt like angry that I was buying this guy a pack of cigarettes, you know, and, but people don't get it. Some people don't get it. It's just this feeling, you know, that you get inside where you kind of just feel compelled to do this, however senseless it may seem, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say that, because like, people who've never smoked, I was a smoker for a long time, don't understand that guy is probably going to go pick up cigarette butts off the street and smoke ends of cigarettes. It's disgusting, but people do it, and maybe get COVID, maybe get whatever, like, because that desperation level, like, sure, you don't want to be like, here, let me support your bad vices. Like, who does? But I think, again, it's always about like people being seen. And I think like the point I was trying to make earlier is, you know, these students in Francesca's course, you know, all shared stories, and one of them got rejected during an act of kindness. And that's always people's fear too. Even when I was on the Today Show with Megyn Kelly, she was like, you know, people don't want to be presumptive. Like, you know, I think you need a handout, or some people don't want to do acts of kindness because they don't want to feel like somebody might rebut their efforts. And one of the kids in her class, that happened. She did this really nice thing. She wanted to help this man out. He was like, you know, no, but thank you. It means more to me that you thought to do it. It means more to me that, you know, you saw me and wanted to do something kind. I don't need the actual act, but the fact that you saw me. And I think it comes up a lot in the book, which is interesting to hear all these different perspectives with no guidance, hit some common threads.
Right.
And it's like people just want to really be seen, valued, and heard.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what happens? Okay, you mentioned rebut. They rebut. I don't need that help, but thank you. And that's really why you do it. It's throwing it out there. But what happens, and how should people deal with it? Because I think people get very frustrated. And I'm going to give you a scenario. I used to live in this town called Merrick, and there was a gentleman.
I know her.
Yeah, there's a gentleman that like walked around, and one day I was buying coffee at the bagel store, and I went in and bought him some coffee. It was cold, and I gave him the coffee. He's like, "Well, why didn't you get me a bagel too?" I'm like, "What?" Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, next time, and if I would have had a bagel, I probably would have gave him my bagel, but I was just like, I was taken back. And there are people when you do throw yourself out there and are kind that are going to come back where they want more. And how do you deal with that? Right. How do you,
especially because you live in New York. I'm from New York, born and raised. So, people are like, oh, you're nice. You're one of the nice ones. What else you got? It's like, let me not let this guy get away, because I did one time an exercise in acts of kindness. I went to Central Park with a friend of mine and handed out roses to strangers. And it was so cool to see these people with like sullen faces, like light up. I also did like Michael Jackson dance moves on a street corner, not caring how ridiculous I look, just to see people join in, because people would laugh at me or laugh with me or dance. But, it was just a moment. But yeah, I think I always feel the same way as you are kind of saying, Brian, which is like, don't be greedy, like that's not cool. Like, just because you see somebody being generous, like what that does to the other person is make them not want to be as generous in the future, because they're afraid that it's not enough. And there are people in this world, there are plenty of them, that they never have enough. They're never going to be enough. They don't have the stuff. They look at the Joneses. They want the same, Mercedes, G-Wagon, whatever. Like, it's always got to be something next. It's always got to be a better job, big pay rate, and those are the people, like, that's just part of their composition. And to me, that's like squandering a lifetime, because if you're not counting your blessings, and I don't want to be like Little Miss Kumbaya, but like, if you're not counting your blessings, if you're not going through the day saying, hey, that actually worked out really well. I was supposed to have a surgery a few weeks ago, and I was really upset when it got canceled, because it was going to be finishing up something I went through in 2020. And that was really difficult. And it got canceled. And I was like, so mad. I was like, ugh. But then I was like, thank God that happened, because with the book launch and work and everything going on, like, how was I going to do that, like, while recovering? And, even though we make plans, I think that actually Daniel Levin mentions this in the book, the old Yiddish expression of like, you make plans, God laughs, it's like, how can you take that and feel yourself being negative about what is out of your control? And then how do you say like, well, what's the good that comes of that?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what most people miss too, like even being kind, is sometimes, someone's having a really bad day, smile at them, give them a hug, and make them feel better. Like, it's just in connection, because you never know how you're changing someone's life. Like, that person could be like ready to end it, and you smiling at them or giving them a hug gives them a little bit of hope. And that, and that's kindness, right? Even simple stuff.
Yeah, it's ironic you bring that up, because yesterday my post in the kindness community was, and on my motivational speaking page was, I want to be the person that says, that inspires others, that can look at me and say, because of you, I didn't give up. But then I turned it over and said, this is the kindness community for me. When I was so sick in 2020, I spent 17 days in the hospital. It was awful. That was what kept me going, is like, there's all these people out there who have various different things that they're facing, but they're still showing up kind in this community. And they're still reminding me that I have a lot of work left to do. And like, even though this is hard and painful, that I can find gratitude in the people that are still giving me life. And same to them. Like, I hope the work that I'm doing with these authors, with this book, with the Evangel series, is like giving someone hope and perspective, that like, it doesn't always have a darkness. Like, there's light to counterbalance. And I remember one of my girlfriends had gone through really bad postpartum, and she was having like all of these kind of, I'd say like delusional thoughts of fear for the baby, no sleep, anxiety. It happens. But I was like, how about you counterbalance that by like thinking that you just walk to your mailbox and there's a check for her entire college tuition? Like, can you find a way to, I know it's ridiculous and I know that's not how you're feeling, but if you're going to think of something that's like polarizingly fearful and fear driven, could you also be like, imagine I won on a scratch off today, or like, imagine like, I wanted those like $1 million a week for life, like just so that you can take the emotional content and balance it, because we have a lot more mental power than I think we give ourselves credit for. And I think this generation is going to really tap into that. Mental health is at the forefront of these discussions. Compassion, empathy, kindness, really understanding interpersonal skills. Gone are the days of the 80s where it was all about like making money and having really good stereo speakers and, Ray-Bans. Thing.
Oh gosh.
I do love my Ray-Bans though. So
yeah, I was just gonna say, I really love my sunglasses.
I do love my Ray-Bans, but you know the ones I mean, like the classic, like Tom Cruise sliding across the floor with only a shirt on, kind of. The risky business.
Right. So speaking about dress code, we started off this with sort of like the Avengers, right? The Kindness Avengers. Now, if all these authors that are in your book were superheroes, right? What costumes would you wear and what weapons would you guys have?
Oh my God. I feel like I have to surface that to the group because I don't want to, take on their personalities and personify that into costumes. But there's definitely some that come through. Like Angelica Perman is somebody I met out in Malibu who is a global intuitive and best-selling author. And she goes by the Sound Empress on Instagram. And it's so awesome. She does those like singing bowls. The Sound Empress. So I see her like, with big hair and like the headphones and, just like illuminating sound. And for Daniel Levin, I was on his podcast. That's how he became an author in the book. He is just so amazing. He used to be like a rabbi. He ran like multi-million-dollar publishing company. And, his thing is he listens like so much. And he's actually helped me title the book. I mean, before it was like going to be the Kindness Anthology. It's like, he's like, no, it's got the action, So when he speaks, I listen because he listens so much that it's like you're like, okay, say something. I want to hear from you. I already know all about me. I'm stuck with me every day, every breath, all in. But I think for him, it would be, like oversized, like ears on the costume, super listening man. So it's really interesting to see how these people emerge, especially like I was saying earlier with Mark Shapiro and his Love Bomb app. I feel like he's going to have like a big heart, on his chest. And, so that's cool. I really should pose that to the group. It may be interesting. We're actually launching a podcast. I'm recording my first episode today. I'll be interviewing each author, and the first episode will be like a collaboration of all the different authors' perspectives. And then from there on, each author will have one episode to talk about the process, their chapter, what they felt like when, but I might add that as one of the questions, Brian.
Yeah,
absolutely. Do it. Brian, absolutely. You're so creative.
He is.
I know I keep you around.
You're a gem.
You are.
And that's not just because of the Red Bull.
I know, Brian's just naturally like that.
Cheers, Brian.
All right, Leigh. So tell us, I know this book is out by the time everybody listens to this. Where can we find it? Tell us everything you want to tell us. We want to read this book.
Yes. Read this book. Shameless plug. Read this book. No, it's on Amazon on the 8th tomorrow. So that's going to be in the past for you, but that's my present life. And it's going on paperback June 21st. Great book to gift to other people. It's giving them the gift of kindness. And I don't just say that because, I'm an author in the book and I want to see all these other authors shine. But 50% of everything from that book is going back to acts of kindness that the authors are going to design in their country or in their city across the nation. And they're going to get to help, create those. So every book sale, please buy it in digital, gift it in paperback, whatever that looks like to you. And yeah, we're going to be talking about doing an audio version, which I love because I rather speak than write. So that's great. And yeah, I hope that people share the stories. I hope that people forward it on. I hope that people realize that it's an act of service to everyone who is suffering, who is hearing bad news on the news all day, who is like really in this place where they feel disconnected from society after the year we had in isolation. It was tough for a lot of people, myself included. Realize that you can be the light if you spread the light. And you'll notice on the front of this, there's a single point of light that radiates. And that's where it is. It starts with you being kind to yourself, understanding how you show up, and then radiating that light out to others. And even if it is like we talked about, being seen, valued, and heard, or it's, a mechanism of doing an act of kindness, or even sharing people's posts, like they have small business, like share their posts, like, your friends who are consultants, like their posts. It doesn't mean you have to buy something, but like, let's do what we can to find those little moments, write a nice review for a restaurant, whatever. Let's find those moments, those micro moments, as Jonathan Darling says, and see the massive impact we can have collectively. And I hope that you guys will enjoy the book as much as our early reviewers did. Nicolette was an early reviewer. So Nicolette, what do you think?
I thought it kept me, I told Leigh, I emailed her at midnight and I said, I'm not often up this late, and I was not planning on reading all as much as I did, but I really just, especially your story, Leigh. I know we're giving a lot of credit to those authors, but I really enjoyed reading your story. And I know we had spoken already, so I kind of knew, but it was just so different, reading it. Everybody, please pick it up, please.
Yay. Well, so good to see you guys. And yeah, like onward and upward. Anything you guys need help on, or if you ever need somebody to just drink Red Bulls and shoot
Absolutely.
the what, I'm here
for it.
Well, thank you, Leigh. Thank you so much. And
thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all the love and support and the kindness.